This was a presentation given by Chris Prater on February the 22nd, 2023. If you like this video or others, please subscribe.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to introduce Chris. I actually don't. Chris and Chris don't know each other that well. It was before I joined WCA. I would paddle with a friend of Chris's, Steve Tate, and every year we'd go to the Magnetawan. And Steve is a fellow racer of Chris's, and of course he. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
He would put us to shame every year, always paddling in the front, and quite a strong paddler. And I was privileged to go to a few races where Steve attended, and I was just blown away with the speed in which people raced. And so really, it was a canoe racer that really got my interest going, along with my uncle, in canoeing. And once COVID hit, I guess I found the WCA and started doing my own thing. But I assume it was through Steve that I found out about Chris and bought one of his paddles and enjoyed it. And I kind of follow the racing scene on the side, and I've always had an interest in doing the Brent run, not trying to make any records, but at least getting it in a weekend. Yeah, I'll just let you take over, Chris. And he's a fellow Londoner down here, so it's nice that us paddlers sort of keep together. Yep. So here's Chris
awesome.
Prater.
Thanks so much, Chris. That's really nice of you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Gary, can you let me know? Yeah. And can you see my screen that I've got up?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, yeah, thanks again for that introduction, Chris. And I'm excited to be here. This is the very first presentation I've ever given about marathon canoeing. And I'm flattered as well. I've been marathon canoeing now for about 8 years. And I'm by no means a professional, but I do it quite a bit, and I enjoy what I do. I'm happy to share my experiences with you folks. So yeah, thanks for having me. So tonight I'm going to talk about sort of what got me into marathon canoeing. I'll talk about equipment, boats and paddles and gear and stuff like that. I'll speak about some races that I've done, some kind of fun, big races outside of Ontario. And I'm also going to look at some Algonquin park routes that I did over the past couple of years that I think your group in particular would be really interested in. So yeah, thanks for joining me. So this is the website for the race that got me into this whole mess. The race is called the Muskoka River X, and if you haven't heard of it, it starts in Huntsville, and then it ends in Huntsville, and typically it's a big loop through the lakes and rivers of the region, and the classic race is 136 kilometers. And this is not something that I signed up for just out of the blue. So this is the story. I went up to visit my wife's cousin in Petawawa. He works at CFB Petawawa. And a couple of his buddies had just finished the Muskoka River X a few weeks before our visit. And Peter was super stoked and excited about this race. And by the time we left their place and come back to London, Ontario, he had asked me if I would join him the following year for the Muskoka River X. And I didn't have an answer for him right away. But while we were driving back in the car, we were going through Algonquin Park, actually kind of along Highway 60, getting closer back to Huntsville. And I was looking out over those lakes, and I thought, man, I think no matter what, being out on those lakes, even if it turns out to be something that I physically can't do, it'll still be a great experience. And so I texted him just as we kind of were passing through Huntsville, and I said, yeah, let's do this. And that's pretty much how it all began. So this is...
Chris, can I just interrupt?
Yeah.
Down
Sure.
at the bottom of your screen, it has Zoom is sharing your screen.
Oh, yeah.
Click
Okay.
on the hide button. Yeah, that
Got
would
it.
be great.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that.
No worries. Yeah. Thanks. The housekeeping stuff. So this is a map of that race, and so here's Huntsville here, and it starts in Huntsville. You go through Lake Vernon, and then into Fairy Lake and Penn Lake, and then there's a huge portage here, bringing you to Lake of Bays, and then down through Lake of Bays to Baysville. That's the first leg of the route. Then you take the South Muskoka River here through kind of more of a wilderness area, much more isolated and secluded, and that brings you back to Bracebridge. So this is all downstream here through this section. And then Bracebridge is kind of like the turnaround point, the confluence of the South Muskoka and the North Muskoka. And then you start heading north up through the upstream into the North Muskoka until you get to Mary Lake here. And then Mary Lake back through the canals, and then you're back to Huntsville, game over. So that's the route. So this is a picture of Peter and I on the dock that very first year, just before the race started. And just thinking back to some of the emotions that we were feeling, we were definitely uncertain of our physical abilities to accomplish this task. And that, I don't know if that ever goes away when you're approaching something big like this. And, added on top of that was just seeing all these other people with their fancy boats and expensive gear. And Peter and I really kind of just had thrown stuff together. We had rented a boat. We borrowed some paddles. We bought a couple paddles. Putting our gear kit together was makeshift at best, I would say. And truly, we didn't really have a lot of people that we could reach out to and get, information about how to rig our boat and stuff. So it was just kind of us figuring things out and hoping for the best. So the boat here, this is our boat on the right, and you can see just kind of all the different gear. We got, bags of food underneath, and we put some padding on our seats. There's a bow light up here. There's some mandatory gear bags and stuff in the back. In terms of equipment that's required, so Muskoka River X, it runs basically like an expedition style race where you have to bring everything with you. So your food, means of making clean drinking water, some survival stuff, all of that has to come with you. You can't have people, handing you food or extra things, extra clothes while you're on a portage or something. You were responsible for bringing all that kit yourself. So that makes it pretty interesting. So you can see the list here of kind of required gear and things. I meant to mention this earlier, but if at any time, if you have questions, I can't see the chat group necessarily because I'm looking at my screen, which I'm looking at the PowerPoint. But if you have questions, please speak up. I'd love to have conversations while things are we're going through the topics.
Okay, I'm watching the chat, so if something comes up, I'll say, X, Y, Z has a question.
Perfect.
Right.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. So I'll talk a little bit more about our first race experience and kind of some of the challenges and the interesting moments that we had. Start of the race looks like this. Typically, this wasn't that same year, but it's from a different year. The race starts at around 7 a.m. and it's typically a little bit of fog on the water, a little bit cold. It's in September, so I think it's the second weekend of September, so it's typically, it's fall weather. The start of the race is always messy. There's just so many boat waves, and with this being our first race, we were at the back behind all of those messy boat waves, and they really play around with your ability to steer the boat. So that was tough right off the go, and I would say we ended up probably in the back third of the pack of about 40 boats that first year, and we pretty much maintained that spot the entire race, about the back third. Portage wise, there's 21 portages on the Muskoka River X. The longest one connects Peninsula Lake to Lake of Bays, and it's called North Portage Road. I believe it's about 1.3 kilometers, but it's uphill and then downhill. And it is a road, which is kind of nice. It's not rugged, but 1.3 kilometers is pretty long. to be doing something quickly. And we were excited to get out of the boat, but at the same time, that excitement didn't last long because you get tired of carrying the boat. So portages were, we wished for them, we hoped for them, and then you got out on portage, and you want it to be over as well. So that first lap around this course was definitely a challenge. What else was interesting? So in terms of timing, so like I said, the race starts at about 7 a.m. We didn't hit Bracebridge here until about 4 p.m. And the portage in Bracebridge is kind of neat. If you've been to Bracebridge, there's a big waterfall in town. It goes around, maybe it's a dam. Anyways, a big staircase. You got to actually portage your boat up this set of stairs to get to the top end. And then after you're in the North Muskoka River, it's maybe 15, 20 minutes of paddling before you're pretty much in the wilderness again. By that time for us, it was basically dark, which is kind of one of the interesting things about this race is it typically takes 16 to 24 hours. So it's going to get dark. And so for us, it got dark somewhere in this section here. And this is, like I said, this is paddling upstream. There are several sections of swifts that you have to navigate, and hitting those in the dark, like Peter and I were not experienced paddlers at this time. So hitting those swifts in the dark and not knowing how those were going to push our boat around, and kind of experiencing that without really a good solid visual frame of reference was quite the challenge in the dark. So that was interesting, fun, and a little bit scary, but we pushed through and we made it. We got up to Mary Lake here. Geez, what time would it have been? Probably about 11 p.m., maybe 12. And we were really cold. It was getting really foggy out. But the cool part was there was heavy fog on the lake, but up in the sky was this beautiful full moon. And the moon that shining through the trees and kind of hitting that fog and kind of glowing through lighting up little strands of fog as it comes through those trees. It was just gorgeous. And I think to this day, whenever I paddle at night, this memory comes back, and it's definitely, it was that experience for sure that's made me love night paddling. It's one of my favorite things to do. So we paddled all the way back through Mary Lake, experienced the canals and the fog. That was fun. We got a little bit lost. It's pretty tough. They meander a lot, and so you can't really tell where it opens up and where to turn. So anyway, yeah, we finished it 21 hours and 17 minutes. This is a picture of us taken by Peter's wife, Courtney. Just minutes after kind of finishing and getting the boat loaded. And we were just totally exhausted, could barely get up out of the boat. I think I crawled onto the dock. Loading the boat was awful. It just felt so heavy. Yeah, and the aftermath of something like this when you've never done it before, the physical stuff, the blisters, the chafing, the fatigue and soreness. I remember, this is maybe too much information, but I remember some serious chafing I had on my body and jumping into the shower because I knew I needed to shower. But when that water hit those sore spots, I just screamed so loud. It was so painful. Probably one of the most painful things I've ever experienced in my life. So 21 hours and 17 minutes, and this left us with one big question. So how do these other people do it so fast? So this is data from the same year. The very top team, so Glenn Dawson and Mike Vincent, they did it in 13 hours and 17 minutes. We're 21 hours. So we're trying to figure out, physically, we don't look that much different, but obviously we're not doing something right. So that led me to a Google search, and Google search to find, if there was any place I could get some training in marathon canoeing. And I would guess I really lucked out. One of the top coaches in Ontario lived 30 minutes from my place, and his name's Bob Vincent. This is him in the bow here, and then in the stern of that boat. He's always got this kind of classic, iconic polka dot hat on. That's his thing. So Bob lived in Dorchester. I live in London, so 30 minutes away. So we started paddling quite a bit, and it was a little bit of there's a bit of a mecca down here of marathon canoeing, and probably has a lot to do with Bob. But all these other people at the time, they lived really close as well, within an hour and a half. So on Saturday and Sunday mornings, everybody would drive to a common location, and we would train. So we would do that as a group, as a large group. We would do that probably, at least once a week, sometimes twice a week. And then midweek, I would get together with Bob, and we'd paddle a location in town. So I really lucked out, and I think that's that's awesome. It's had such a wonderful impact on my life. Some of these great people that helped me out. So Gwen Heyman in the back, in the stern of Bob's boat there. This is Steve Tate, who Chris Mayberry was speaking about. This is Don Stoneman and Dean Brown. And over the years, I've had, so many wonderful opportunities to paddle with each of them, and just learning different things from each of them. Steve, for example, is just like this wizard at reading the currents of the river, and he talks to you so nice and patiently as you're paddling about, what to expect as you, say, enter an eddy or exit an eddy, about, how is it going to impact the boat, those types of things. Bob's a really good kind of strategy expert. I'll talk about race strategy in a little bit, but strategy and tactics for sure. Dean Brown. Dean's great Dean was a rower, so he brings a lot of kind of endurance training and knowledge. And Don's a great spirit, just an awesome guy all around. He was the OMCRA, our Ontario Marathon Canoe and Kayak Racing Association president for about, I think, 5 years or so. So that's the group. Within a couple of years after discovering all these coaches around me, I was ready to get in the boat and start racing with them. And training's one thing, because you can make mistakes. It's pretty forgiving. But when you start racing, you can definitely still make mistakes, but there's just a lot more pressure. So it was really nice to have experience with me in the boat as I kind of cut my teeth on this new sport over the years. This is another awesome paddler, Liz Loke, here in the stern. So essentially, that's how I became passionate about marathon canoeing, mostly by luck and good fortune and just good geography. So next section I would like to talk about is our gear. And our boats definitely look a little bit different than most of the boats most canoes in general. Like usually when it's on top of my car, like one of our racing boats on top of my car, people will ask me if it's a kayak, because it's so narrow, or it looks narrow, at least at the bow and the stern. So in terms of our boats, like we've got sort of different classifications and categories. We talk about stock boats, and those are kind of more traditional. I even use mine as a tripping boat. It looks like this. They're quite long, so it's 18 feet and 6 inches. They are basically totally flat along the bottom, so no rocker. They go fast and they go straight, is basically what they're made for. So this is a stock C2 here on the left, and this is a stock C1. And then the other category that we have is our pro boats, so pro racing canoes. And so same length, 18 feet 6 inches, a little bit different in width. So this one's 27 inches at the 4-inch water line. And to explain how you would measure that, you flip the boat upside down, and they've got this kind of caliper tool that's set to 4 inches of depth. And if it's wider than 27 inches at that 4-inch depth, then it doesn't qualify. Some other kind of interesting aspects about these boats. So you can see these tractor style seats that we've got, bow and stern. The sides of the bow and also just in front of the stern paddler, you notice that they're quite pulled in. So the gunnel's basically right next to you. That's so you can get your paddle right next to the side of the boat and kind of maximize that forward force that you're getting out of your paddle rather than having it out to the side. In terms of, so this one's a Pro C2, and C2 just means a 2-person canoe, and this would be a Pro C1 down here in the bottom right. A lot of people have asked me about the Pro C1s, these solo boats. What's the deal with these wings? And it's interesting how things like this develop. Basically, it was someone's interpretation of the rules. So the rule was it had to be a certain width within a certain distance of center. And so the person thought, well, sure, let's do this. We'll make it that wide, and then we'll pull the side walls right back in so that I can get my paddle in the water again right next to the side of the boat. So it does achieve that, but I think what the obvious disadvantage is, there's not much secondary stability. So the primary stability is decent, but as soon as you start to lean the boat on its side, you really don't get any additional buoyancy, and in fact it almost gets worse, like a log, and it just rolls. So C1s, the solo C1 Pro boats are fun to paddle. They're fast, but they definitely take some learning before you can lean it. Some special features of our boats that you may not have seen just from those other pictures. So over top of the center section, we'll have like it's not I guess it's like a covering or membrane that it's called, we call a spray deck, just to keep water out. So if water gets splashed on there from maybe other paddlers, or if there's a wave, or if you take a corner and you lean the boat over, you don't want water rushing in there. So we've got these spray decks on. We got paddle clips and a bungee cord. So we usually bring at least one extra paddle in the boat. Paddles sometimes break during a race, so you got to have an extra. Tractor style seats, like I mentioned, with lots of seat foam. You can be seated in one of these boats for a really long time before you hit a portage, so you want to make sure it's comfy. Both the bow and stern seats, they're on these round rails that allow the seats to slide forwards and backwards, so you can adjust your trim, as well as you can mix it up if you have different size paddlers or different size legs. Water bottle holders. So typically we've got big 2-liter bottles that have a hose, and there's a little piece of Velcro here that you can attach your hose to. So the water is basically always handy. We've got the foot straps. So this is actually a picture of the stern, and you can kind of see it maybe right in through here. But so we've got these foot straps for the stern paddler to attach them to the boat really nicely. That way when they lean, their feet are still attached. It adds a lot of stability, but it also lets them use their entire body to help kind of power the boat. I've got something similar in the bow for myself. It's really just kind of like an angled footboard that you put both feet on. And the bow itself is so narrow that you don't really need the foot straps. You're pretty much locked in there anyways. The other part that's kind of neat, and we stole this from, I guess, the sailing world. We've got these in-floor bailers. So when you get water in the boat, as long as the boat's moving well, moving fast, you can push this little lever down, and it opens up a little venturi vent to the bottom, and the water will just suck right through there out of the bottom of the boat. So that's pretty cool. In terms of paddles, so there's really 3 kind of major companies currently making marathon canoe paddles. One based in New York is Zavrel Racing Equipment, and so ZRE is their kind of logo name. Lavasse, so Lavasse paddles are made in Quebec by Michel Lavasseur, and they're quite nice, very light. And then this is my paddle here. So Chris was talking about buying a paddle off me here in London, Ontario, and so this is my brand. In terms of characteristics of these paddles, so they are very light. So anywhere from say 7 ounces up to about 9 ounces is as heavy as we would typically go for a race paddle. The bend is 12 degrees, which is pretty standard. There are some, like ZRE is a huge company, and they've got, I guess they must have a lot of molds. So they do offer some different angles if there's one you're specifically looking for, but 12 degrees seems to be what most people are wanting.
We have a few questions from the audience. One,
All right.
Murray. Ken, do you want to de-mic yourself or mic yourself and just ask your question? Oh, Ken might have stepped away. I'll ask his question while he's trying
Okay,
to
sure.
Mike. He's asking, what's the average weight of the boat?
Good question. So I would say it does depend on what type of boat. So if we look at, these three boats in these pictures, these are pro canoes. So you're looking at about 30 pounds, maybe even less, 27 to 30 pounds.
Okay.
The stock boats, it depends, I guess, depending on what material you get it made of. If it's a carbon stock boat, you're probably looking at around 35, maybe 37. Yeah, but they are light. With that comes some fragile. They are fragile too.
We have a question from Chris Mayberry. Chris, you might unmic yourself and ask it.
I have a few questions.
Oh boy.
I won't monopolize your time. Two, I'll give them to you right off the bat. The stock boat, I wonder, is that for marathon races, and the pro boat's just for like a direct distance within a day? And the other question was, how do you portage when you're racing?
Okay.
Yeah.
So the first question was stock boats. Can you repeat that one for me?
Yeah, is that for marathon racing when you're doing your 24 hours with your gear?
Yeah, okay, so sure. Yeah, I see what you're going.
Yeah. They just for a shorter race. Yeah.
It really depends. Like, there are some races where the stock boat might be beneficial. So for example, the Yukon River Quest. Yeah, I guess in general, if it's a race where you've got a lot of gear with you, you're going to want to have space to store that stuff. And, going back to the spray deck, this doesn't really give you a lot of space. You can shove some stuff under here, but it's not coming out very easily. So to portage would be kind of miserable with that gear kit underneath. So in general, yeah, if we're going to be, carrying packs and stuff, if it's an expedition style race, you're probably going to be in one of these stock boats. And then if it's a marathon, maybe a shorter distance, or if you have support, like maybe I'll talk about some races where we have pit crews that can give us food and water and stuff, where nothing's really you don't need to keep anything in the boat except the food that you need for the next 2 or 3 hours and a life jacket. That's when we would use one of these pro boats. Yeah. What was your second question?
The second question was, when you're portaging on those marathon races, I was trying to picture you guys portaging on that 136 kilometers. Does somebody take the boat, or how do you guys do it to be efficient?
Yeah. So there's a couple different ways. I can show you the one here. Where'd that go? I just had it up. This is a pretty standard way, but it doesn't work for a really long distance. So instead of one person carrying it, some of these boats don't even have a yoke in the middle, because they add weight, right? So if you can get rid of 2 pounds or 3 pounds of yoke and just have an aluminum crossbar or a carbon cross piece, then that's a weight saving. So this is a pretty standard way where both paddlers will just shoulder it. My favorite way, though, and this is how we did it for Brent Run, and try to do it on the Muskoka River X as well. We actually flip. It's similar in style, but the stern paddler will actually kind of wear it on their head like a hat. So each gun will rest on one of their shoulders, while the bow paddler, the boat's upside down. So it's not like this. You flip the boat over, and the stern paddler wears it on their head like a hat with one gunnel resting on each shoulder. And then the bow paddler just has the deck from the front of the canoe sitting on one side. That's my favorite method. It allows the stern paddler to see better. Like when with this method of portaging here, the vision of the stern paddle is totally blocked to the right side of their body, which, if it's a rough trail, that's not good. You kind of want to have better vision all around. So yeah, my favorite method is to wear it as a hat. And when we do that, we'll actually put foam on the gunnels back next to the stern paddler, so that when it goes upside down, there's foam padding there for them. It's really comfy, actually. And I do, if you haven't ever tried it, it's worth giving it a try, because to share that weight is quite nice. Any other questions in there, Gary?
Yeah, there was one question that came from Tom C. What is the top speed of one of those pro boats?
Okay. So top speed, I guess, how long do we have to maintain it for? And no current. Okay, so we'll go flat water. I would say you're probably looking at, if you don't have to maintain it, probably about 15, maybe 16 kilometers an hour. That's pretty cool. I know going downriver, I mean, it's not quite fair, but going downstream with our GPS, sometimes we hit like 25. It's just silly, and it's only for a brief instant, but it's a lot of fun.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.
If other people want to ask a question, I guess just open your mic, and when Chris is about to take a breath, jump in.
That sounds good. Yeah. So that's the gear kind of chat. I want to talk about, I guess, marathon canoe training in general. So there's 3 different areas that I'm going to focus on. We'll look at skill and tactics as our first kind of area focus, and then we'll check out some endurance training, and then we'll look at some strength training protocols. This first sort of part of skill and tactics that we'll look at is just the stroke mechanics itself. And so I've got a couple of video clips that I can share with you, and I don't need the audio here, Gary, so you can just hold on for now. Everything should work, hopefully. So this first video, I just wanted to kind of share what it looks like when we're paddling at full speed, and then we'll slow the stroke down a little bit after that. What just happened? There it goes. Yeah, so this is our kind of full speed stroke rate, and usually that's somewhere between 60 to 70 strokes per minute. And to be honest, like, it doesn't take that much effort to keep the boat moving at about 7 to 8 kilometers per hour. The hull resistance really increases after that with the speed of the boat. And it gets hard to maintain. It gets hard to go fast when you're about 9.5, maybe 10, 11 kilometers per hour. That's when things get tough, when you start to feel like you're really working. But just watching these guys right now, they're just pretty much chilling out, talking, having a good time. So they're probably doing 8 kilometers an hour while they're just cruising here, which is really neat. Like, if you think about you're tripping, if you could be moving 8 kilometers per hour without really having to work very hard, that's pretty cool. The second video is the same gentleman. But it just kind of goes a little bit slower in one of the boats off to the side here. And I'll just talk about a couple of key points that we're trying to focus on during our stroke. So the very first one is getting a little bit of torso twist. This right shoulder here just came a little bit forward as he reached with the paddle. You want to try to put the paddle in at your feet, so slicing the paddle into the water really nice and clean. The top hand's going to drive down, and while the top hand is driving down, you're pulling back with your core and your shoulder. And this is really, I've kind of already missed it, but the power phase is really short, where you're applying you're trying to just almost explode onto the paddle like you're swinging a baseball bat, and then the rest of it is just kind of momentum carrying it through. So the power phase is really short. As soon as he starts to bend his elbow, that power phase is over. And that elbow bend is really just there to help him pull the paddle out of the water and then recover it. And so I'll play it now. We'll just watch one more time. I'll talk a little bit about the recovery. So the path of the paddle we're trying to follow is shaped like a D, and it goes straight back along the side of the boat. That's the power phase. And then the elbow bend helps to bring the paddle up out of the water. And once that blade is exited, it's going to kind of hook around like this, making like the curve of a capital D, and then straight back again, curve it out, slice it into the water, straight back, and just repeat over and over and over again. So those are some of the important kind of technique aspects of our stroke. There's lots of subtleties, and I have completed my marathon introduction to marathon coaching, but I'm by no means an expert on that stuff. I just know what works for me. So sticking with skill and tactics kind of topic here, something else is pretty neat that we do during races is we draft each other. So you might be familiar with that from maybe cycling, where you see the peloton all packed up and the person in the front is like breaking the wind basically for everyone else. We do the same thing with paddling, and we actually get some different benefits from it too. Besides just breaking the wind for us, or we actually can ride the waves of the boats in front of us. So if you've ever, I'm sure everyone's kind of noticed the boat waves that come off the back of a boat, and we're using those essentially to lift up the stern and kind of get a little bit of a ride downhill as the boat in front of us or beside us continues on. So there's two different spots that will do that. One is called side wash, and so that's what this picture on the bottom left is of. And so for side wash, basically these waves that come off the hull here, we're placing the stern of the boat onto one of those, and that's lifting up the back of the boat and making it kind of want to run downhill, pulling our boat forward with the energy that is passing through the water from this lead boat. And so this boat here would be the one in the lead, and then everybody else is just kind of riding waves of each other as well as this main boat. So that's side wash. The second spot we'll do it is called stern wash, and it's a really similar idea. We're looking at these waves in that case, and you're trying to put your stern onto one of those, and these waves are actually a little bit bigger than the side wash waves. So you're trying to get your stern onto one of these and then just kind of ride that. And it's sometimes you'll get with a team that gets annoyed with the wash riding. They think that you're, I guess, maybe taking advantage of them, but usually, more often than not, teams are open to the idea that this is a really long race and we can work together here. You can lead for half an hour, we can lead for half an hour, and just kind of take turns spelling each other off. So usually that's the way it goes.
Is there a lot to tactics then when you're racing? Like,
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So do you have a strategy going in, or do you make it when you see your competitors?
Our typical, my mindset is usually have a really good start, which means don't end up in the trashy water behind all the boats. So you want to, if you can be in the front pack, that's ideal. Have a really good start, and then ride wash for as long as you can. And then at some point, you got to make your move. And that's, I think, probably the hardest decision. If you know the race course, it makes it a lot easier because you know what lies ahead. But for me, because I'm still fairly new to this and I don't get out to paddle that many big races, most of it just comes off of, if we're feeling good, let's go for it. And that can go two ways, either good or bad. So the timing of when you decide to stop riding wash and start to make your move is critical. And I think practice makes perfect, and so does knowledge for that one. Something else that we'll practice a lot during our sessions is turning. So a lot of the courses go up rivers that are narrow and have a lot of meandering kind of on themselves. So for example, this is a point that comes out and there's actually a full 180-degree turn here. So this boat, they're going upstream. So they're kind of in a bit of an eddy here, and they're going to try to keep that bow on the left side, not let it get out into the middle here. If it gets out in the middle, it's going to get caught by that current. They're going to end up on the other side of the river, which is not the shortest course. So they really do want to keep it over there. So in order to turn the boats, we will use a lean as well as probably some bow steering strokes that a lot of you are familiar with. I think we just call them different names for the most part. The lean accomplishes a lot though for us. It creates high pressure on the right side of the hull in this case, and that extra high pressure will cause the whole boat to move to the left. So that combined with a good cross bow, like this bow paddler is doing here, and then some good draw strokes from the stern will really whip this boat around. So there's a lot of turns like that that are really technical, just tons of fun to practice. In order to keep the boat lean like this, it takes a lot of experience. If you twitch, as you want to be really consistent with your lean and kind of just be able to hold it there at a particular angle. And if you kind of second guess yourself and you twitch because you think you're going to dump it and swim, then your corner is basically lost. The boat's just going to kind of continue going on straight, and you just lost all of the momentum that you had turning the boat. So tons of fun to practice. Another type of turn that we'll work on is buoy turns. So buoy turns, sometimes there'll be a buoy in a race where you got to say go upstream, turn around a buoy and come back down. Sometimes there'll be buoys on lakes that you got to go around. This particular one is actually part of, it's a sprint course that they do the day before the big race. And on these sprints, it's a time trial. It's about 2 to 3 minutes long total. You go up to a buoy, turn around, and then back to the start line. And based on the time trial, it puts you into a starting order for the big race. So only about 2 or 3 minutes. I'll just show you this quick buoy turn, how they accomplish it. Lots of fun to practice. Really trying to take advantage of the current. I mean, there's really no other way of doing it. These guys did a great job. You can see the stern paddler almost drops his paddle, puts his paddle right on the bottom, and is pivoting. He's kind of being the pivot point for that turn. I talked a little bit already about the race starts, and so you can see this lineup here. This is at La Classique de Canoe in Quebec, and there's probably close to 100 boats. You can just imagine the mess of waves that will be coming off the back of these if you're not towards the front. And I think that, for me, that's probably one of my biggest weaknesses right now, is we just don't have enough people to practice where there's a lot of boat waves like this. So it's tough to replicate, this setting on a regular basis for us. So when we do go to a big race like this, it's a bit of an eye opener, and it's definitely an area that I need to improve in. But the big idea is, can you get what do you need to do to get your boat moving up and fast? In order to be in the front, maybe 10 boats or so, and then it's all good. Just finishing up kind of skills and tactics. There's just a couple loose ends here. So these races are long, so anywhere from 4 to 24, 36 hours. So you have to eat and drink on the fly. So that's definitely a big part of our training, is just practicing that and trying to, making sure that we're familiar with all the foods we're going to eat and that our bodies can digest them. You don't want to experiment with anything new the day of a race. That never turns out well. So you can see, like, a lot of people will have goos and gels and things like that kind of taped to the inside of their boat, just borrowing from other marathon sports, basically kind of the same nutritional ideas. I think in the water jug you saw earlier, there was like a mix of Gatorade or some kind of liquid nutrition. So that's pretty common as well. For me, I'll use some gels and stuff, but usually just when I feel like I need some caffeine. For me, I try to stick with like more natural foods like apples, oranges. I really like cashews, things that are small and easy to pop in your mouth. When you're during a race, you really don't want to miss more than 1 or 2 strokes in order to feed. That takes a lot of practice. You don't want to choke, but you definitely want it to be fast. I mentioned also already that during some races we can have support crews, and so that's this picture here in the bottom left is of a race in Belize that I'll talk about a little bit later on. Sometimes the pit crews will drop your food right to the boat in the water, and so that's what this young gentleman here is doing for this team. So they're getting kind of food and water replaced. Other times it'd be on a portage, so you'll just switch bags with a friend who's there following you along during the race course, and you get fresh food and fresh water that way. But you definitely want to be fast on portage. You don't want to get past because you're sorting out your food. Chris already asked a question about portaging, so yeah, it's definitely something you want to practice because it's a big part of a few different races where there's like a road that you got to run on, or a trail, or that's it's all kinds of terrain depending on the race. So you definitely want to have some good shoulders, some good practice. In terms of endurance training, I'll just kind of go through this really briefly. My go-tos are things that I can access really quickly. So I find to get to the river is a bit of a process. I got to load my boat, and it takes me 30 minutes to get there, and then paddle for a couple hours. I mean, that's a 3.5 hour ordeal. I can do that once a week and keep my family happy. But if I try to do it 2 or 3 times, then that causes a little bit of stress. So other things that I'll try to do, go for a run. We've got a fan bike upstairs, and I really like that a whole lot. I actually there's a paddling ergometer. So you're likely familiar with a rowing machine. This is similar to that, but it has a canoe paddle attachment, and there's a little flipper arm. So you can paddle on the left, and then 8 to 10 strokes later, when you're ready to switch sides, you can switch to the right side, and the little paddling arm just kind of flips over, and you can paddle on the right now. So, but definitely, if I could, paddling would be my choice, but there's just not enough time. Logistics are too tough. In terms of my training goals for endurance training, there's really 2 different types of focuses that I have. So the first one would be like a steady state, where I'm just out to do kind of a moderate intensity for 1 to 2 hours, just kind of building that cardio base. The other one would be interval training, where I'm looking to kind of push my cardio a little bit harder. So just an example of an interval workout would look something like this. So just kind of taking turns between working really hard, so high intensity work rate, so 80 to 100% max effort for a minute, and then 1 minute recovery, and then 2 minutes of work, 2 minutes of recovery, and so on. And that, I think what's great about this is you're pushing yourself, but it's for short periods of time, and it's kind of variable, so it keeps your interest, as opposed to just trying to go out and go hard and push yourself. This kind of structures it, and I really do need that kind of structure in order to be consistent. For strength training, I'm pretty limited with time, as many of you I'm sure are as well. Like we wear a lot of hats in life, and so the parenting, and I'm a teacher, and make paddles, and I'm a marathon canoeer, so I do want to strength train, but I don't have much time. So this is what I tend to do. I try to choose exercises that are effective because they use a lot of different muscle groups. So those tend to be compound movements. And so this is my short list here. This is my current workout. And I'll try to do it 2 to 3 times a week. But deadlifts, push-ups are great, barbell row. This is my favorite one currently, actually. It's a V-sit, one-arm dumbbell shoulder press. And what I really like about it is, you got your core firing at the same time as the shoulder work, and it's one-sided, which is really similar to paddling. So trying to find exercises that are really close matches to canoeing is definitely one of the things that I focus on when I'm putting together an exercise list. And then, of course, some core work. And so I'll do this as a superset where I'll go all the way through these 6 exercises without really much rest in between, if any. And then I'll take 2 minutes off, and then I'll go through it again, 2 minutes off, and then go through the 3rd time. And that's my workout. And that takes about 45 minutes. The other piece that's actually, I won't say it's more important, but it definitely is important, is the rehab and the prehab. So just from paddling for such long periods of time, as well as some really long portages that I'll talk about towards a little bit later on, you develop some overuse injuries, and prevention as well as kind of rehabbing those is always on my mind. And I tend to do these. I have a bunch of small little exercises that I've learned just through physio that kind of keep your body, keep those muscles that tend to get injured, keep them strong and supple and active. So lots of rehab and prehab. I'm just going to grab a quick drink of water. If anybody has any questions, this is a great time.
Yeah, we're clear on questions.
Awesome. So I'll just quickly talk about a couple major races that I've done. This is the Asable River Canoe Marathon, and it's one of 3 races that they call the Triple Crown. So 3 big races in North America. One is the General Clinton in New York, and that's at the end of May. This is the second, the Asable River Canoe Marathon. It's in July. Yeah, it's in July. And then the third is the Lac Classique de Canoe in Quebec, and that's in September. I've done all those 3 except Lac Classique. I haven't done that one yet. The Asable, though, is it's a really neat race. What's cool about it, there's a couple neat things, actually. So the first being that the race starts at 9 p.m. It's a 90-mile race, starts at 9 p.m. So basically, you've got about 30 to 45 minutes before it gets dark, and a major section of the race then is going to be done at night, and everyone's going to go through it. So that's pretty cool. Neat experience. Navigating at night is definitely a challenge, especially for us because this is northern Michigan. We can't get there to practice paddle a whole lot, so it's pretty much the first time we've seen it when we go through the course. So that's tough. The other neat thing, so you saw the video before of that buoy turn with the sprint. That sprint race is that time trial is a day before, and that's to figure out where people will start in the starting lineup. And this is a picture just after the horn has gone off to start the race. The race actually starts on the road. And so you've got about a 300-meter sprint with your boat before you get to the dock where you put your boat in, and it's a narrow river. So I've got a video that I'm going to have Gary share that gives you a good vibe for what this race is like. You can see, I often, when I'm explaining what this is like, because Southwestern Ontario and Ontario in general, most people don't even know what marathon canoeing is. Well, when you go to upstate Michigan, it's like their NASCAR. So that's the best analogy I can give. Like everyone, this is in Grayling, everyone in Grayling comes out to watch the start of this race. It's just, this is the event of the year. The race itself, like I said, is 90 miles, and it goes from Grayling all the way down to Oscoda, just on the shore of Lake Huron. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let Gary share a video that I sent to him earlier.
All right. Let's see if this works. All right, can you see the start of the video?
Yep.
And we will start it.
Looking good. Thanks for the dialogue, guys. Sounding looking good. Seeing and hearing things nobody gets to hear. That's awesome. Woo! Keep it up.
Back to you, Chris.
Perfect. Thanks, Gary. Yeah, so that gives you a good idea, kind of the energy of that race. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why it's so exciting and so fun to go down there and race, is just the people, the experience itself. So I did this in 2019 with my good buddy Oliver, who actually also lived in London at the time. He's moved now, but it was our first time doing this race, for both of us. So that qualified us as rookies in the rookie category. And so we were the top rookie team at 16 hours and 15 minutes over the 90-mile course. Winning time probably was somewhere around, I want to say roughly somewhere in the 15-hour range. Prizes, so you might be wondering that, is there money up for grabs? Yeah, when you travel, there is. So Michigan and New York and Quebec, you pay to enter the race, and the clubs themselves, they have some sponsorships. So usually a race will pay out to, say, maybe 25th spot, which a lot of times just means you're going to get your entry fees back if you come 20 through 25th. But if you do come in the top 10, it can actually be a significant amount of money. Those three major races, the Triple Crown, those have prize purses probably close to $4,000 to $5,000 each. So there's definitely some money in it, but it's not like you're going to make a living. But they do call it, it is professional. They're semi-professional or something like that. The other race that I wanted to just share with you is La Ruta Maya, and this race is in Belize, and it starts off close to the Belize and Guatemala border here in the town of San Ignacio, and you paddle downstream through, I'm not even sure, I can't remember what the name of the river is, to Belmopan, which is, I believe, the capital of Belize, and then from Belmopan you just continue following the river. It's quite, it kind of goes between small villages and then jungle, and then small village and then jungle, until you get closer to the ocean. One of my good friends lives in this village of Barrel Boom here, and that's the finish line on day 3. And then day 4, starts off from Burrell Boom, and you finish in Belize City, paddling, kind of the urban center, which is really, really cool to see. Again, it's the people that make this race so awesome. So you can see, the number of canoes is fantastic. So again, you're looking probably anywhere from 60 to 100 canoes. They're 3-person canoes, which is kind of unique and interesting. They're also incredibly narrow, lots of tumble home in the sides, very tippy, but very fast, lots of fun. I think they're around 20 feet long, these boats. My friend that lives in Burrell Boom, he actually builds the boats for the race, and they're all beautiful cedar strip boats like this one here. But again, yeah, just the people and the fans are just so excited, and that's a fun and makes for a really fun race experience. This is the start line. Upstream is maybe 200 meters upstream is where the race actually begins, and then all of these boats are going to go under this wooden bridge, this low wooden bridge. It's just chaos, and there's all kinds of crashes and swimming going on. And again, you don't want to be in the back half. You want to be in the front half so that you can get through it first.
I just Googled the river, and it's Belize River.
Oh, there you go. Awesome. Thanks, Gary. Another fun aspect is, just the fans that are there to help you out. So the pit crews and stuff, it's all, local people. They're really comfortable to just jump in the river and bring you your water and your food and take your old stuff out. Just beautiful spot, like to paddle through the jungle is quite an experience. We saw howler monkeys and all kinds of really neat tropical birds. I think we saw one crocodile, and that was it. That was closer to Belize City actually than in the jungle or anything like that. But just lots of really neat stuff. So just all around a great experience. So those are kind of 2 major ones I've done, but I've definitely got others on the list that I want to accomplish soon. The first one is the Yukon River Quest, and I've had friends asking me now probably for about 3 years, and every year I think, okay, I think this is going to be the year that I can do it, but family is it's too hard to get away. So maybe next year. Yukon River Quest goes from Whitehorse to Dawson City, and it's 750 kilometers long downstream. Incredible current. Like the current itself in the river is like 20 kilometers per hour. So you add then your 8 to 10 kilometers per hour of your boat speed, and you're traveling 30 kilometers per hour downstream. So that makes it a lot of fun. Huge river though, just a massive, wide, and a little bit intimidating in some places. One spot in particular is called Five Finger Rapids, where the waves are said to be 3-4 feet tall. And you've seen our canoes. They're not whitewater canoes with flotation tanks or anything like that. So if you take on water, you're going under pretty quick. Another race that I love to do over in England is the Devies to Westminster, and it's a 200-kilometer race that I think would be a lot of fun. I like to try to travel and race as well. The third one is a Dusi Canoe Marathon in South Africa, and if you get a chance later on, give it a Google search. You won't believe the whitewater that these people are doing, and you won't believe some of the weirs and dams that they're sliding down. So you can see a little bit of a snapshot of what's happening here, but I can't even imagine what this must feel like to slide down this kind of waterfall staircase thing. I would need some practice at that before feeling comfortable, but it looks like a lot of fun. And that brings me to the section that almost wraps up the slideshow here. So I want to talk about 2 experiences that I had with different routes in Algonquin Park that I think you guys will be really interested in. They are kind of more wilderness canoe routes. The first one is called the Meanest link, and we were motivated to do these during COVID actually. So prior to COVID, my friend Oliver and I had been talking about the Meanest link, but we also realized that it's a big commitment in both time and physical effort. And I don't think we thought we would never fit that into a regular race season. And then COVID hit and all our races were canceled. So, we started thinking, okay, well, maybe we'll do it. So this is the Meanest Link route. And it's the idea is that it connects the Algonquin Outfitter outposts, the one in Huntsville here, to the one up in Brent, and then the one at Opeongo Lake, and then the one at Oxtongue Lake. So it's a route that connects all 4 of those. And it was developed in memory of Bill Swift Sr., they called him the Meanest. And that's not because of his personality, it was because of his kind of gruff looking exterior. So what I've done is I actually pulled up the Algonquin Outfitters page on this, because I think if you're interested, this is a great place to go to have a look, to get some information. So it's got a bit of a description here about, who created it and how it went the first time. I believe that it's broken up into sections as well. So there's different kind of stages or parts to this link. And the one cool thing is, we did it like marathon canoe style. You can do it your own way. If it takes you 14 days or 2 years, doing it in stages, it doesn't matter. It's really just a personal accomplishment thing. And it's a great way to challenge yourself. It's a great way to explore Algonquin Park. So we've actually done it twice. The first time that I did it, I started in Huntsville. So we did this leg first. We started in Huntsville. Let's see if this blows up good. And you go, immediately leave Huntsville and you jump into the Big East River. This is all upstream through here, and it's shallow. It's rocky. The rocks are not friendly. They are tough walking rocks. They're more like small boulders. And this is probably one of the most challenging sections, this first section that we chose to do in our first year. So anyways, yeah, you get up through the Big East River, and then you finally hit Algonquin Park, and life starts to get good. You get to see some lakes and stuff, finally some lake paddling, lots of portages. In total, the total distance of the entire Meanest Link is a little bit uncertain, which is kind of interesting because, there's a lot of people that have done it, including myself. And, we carry GPSs with us. But depending on how frequently your GPS is sending a signal to the satellites, you get variations in the readings on the actual distance. So, for example, the first year we did it, we got 330 kilometers. The second year we got 340 kilometers, but I was only sending a signal to the satellites every 30 minutes. So it's missing a lot of distance. And so I asked, actually just recently in our Meanest Link chat group, I asked if anybody had, more accurate distance readings. And Gord Baker, who is kind of like the caretaker of the route, works at Oxtongue Lake Algonquin Outfitters. He said 395 is kind of like the unofficial distance for the whole route. So, and again, like that sounds like a lot. It's a big distance, but the nice part is, if you decide to do this, I would break it up into chunks and just pick one of the sections and do it one section at a time. If you're feeling good, when you got time, maybe you can do a second section. If I were to do it, and if I were to suggest a particular section to do, I think a really good warm-up one would be from Opeongo to Oxtongue Lake. It goes down through the Oxtongue River downstream. Really nice meandering river, beautiful. Lots of nice grasses on the bank where you might see moose and stuff. So that's a really cool section. The second section that I would highly recommend is the Brent to Opeongo. Again, just beautiful lakes, really neat spots of Algonquin that you're not going to see a whole lot of people on. If you do it, bring a fishing rod. The river section in here, I can't remember the name of the river, but there's some. Pardon me?
The Crow River?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's the Crow River. Yeah, great brook trout fishing along there. The only setback for that section is the 5 kilometer portage, the Dixon Bonfield portage. So you would have to deal with it, but otherwise, that's a great, beautiful section. Just take your time. Section I would avoid if you aren't interested in doing the whole thing. Avoid this mess, at least this part. If you were to jump in here at Rain Lake, actually, this would be a really neat way to do it. Skip the Big East, jump in at Rain Lake. The section along the Nipissing, again, just really neat, meandering.
Thick.
What's that?
It's thick with alders.
It's thick, yeah. There are some thick alders up in there. It's brutal. And I've got a picture. I'll swing back to the slideshow in a second. Yeah, the alders are bad, but once you get through that stuff, it turns into a really neat meandering river that you're definitely going to see some wildlife, and you're not going to see many people if you see any at all. So really, really cool section. Let me pop.
Yeah. The issue with
back.
the Brent Opiongo is when you finish the Petawawa and you go up the Crow, it's all uphill. And there's like 2 portages there.
Yeah.
And then when you finally get to the Opiongo, baby, that's 5.2K. So it's mega portaging.
Yeah, it is and those Crow River portages suck. They're brutal.
Yeah, it's straight uphill.
And I do remember that 2 kilometer one. We've done this twice now, this entire route. And I don't think I remember the first time we did it. I don't remember them being as bad as the second time. And I don't know if it's just because we hit it and we were at a different level of fatigue or a different level of physical
I think
pain.
what I would recommend is, like, if you do the Rain Lake put in, go the opposite direction to Huntsville. So you're going down the Big East.
Oh yeah, people do
Huge
that
difference.
too. Yeah, for sure. Yep, that's a good idea.
If you're going up, it's like you said, it's all these cobblestones. You can't pass.
Yeah. And that's what this picture is.
You know?
So this picture here in the top right, this is the Big East. And you can see this is Oliver. I was standing on the shore for this one, making him drag it up the middle. But the footing is just so unpredictable. The boulders are just, the football to soccer ball, even bigger size. And you don't know what's coming. So that makes it really tough. When we did it, we actually had, I bought it's very practical on a night like tonight, actually. We bought those ice spikes that you put on the bottom of your boots in the winter.
Yeah, icers.
And the studded ones, and I put those on the bottom of my shoes, and they helped quite a bit. But by the time we were done, the carbide tips were all dulled and they were pretty much useless anyway. So
one
that's
of the things that you mentioned. You don't have to do it in one shot. Like we did it in 3 summers.
Okay.
Each time. The brutal thing is, like, from Brent to Opiongo, it's a 6-hour car shuttle to get to the top.
Yeah, it's brutal that way.
The
if
first
you can
day
organize
and
it,
the last day is just all driving.
Yeah, we were really lucky. Like, well, I guess if you get yourself up there, then there's no problem. Yeah, but the car shuttle would be brutal. For sure. Yeah, it's a long way around. You got to find a friend that really likes you and have them drop you off at the top. That would be the way to do it. This other picture here, you guys were talking about the alders on the Nipissing. So this is a quick little snapshot here of what that looks like, and we're talking about ducking, pulling yourself through these branches for probably 2 hours.
And it's a check
and that's
when you
if
go
you're moving
in,
well.
there's no way to go back.
That's right. I called it the Chinese finger trap. Yeah, I called it the Chinese finger trap. Yeah, you do not go backwards. You only go forwards. And it's important because
you stand up and you look at the end of the marsh, and it's a K away.
Yeah.
But you've done 4 or 5K to get to there.
Yeah, I remember watching the tree line and looking at the sky, and then kind of seeing the moon switch sides we were on. I'm like, did we turn around? Are we going the wrong way? Like, you literally turn around on yourself probably 40 or 50 times. It's just a maze. And going back to the alders, like, one of the hard parts is trying to figure out which way the water is actually flowing. Like, where is the main channel? Because like you said, you don't want to go backwards. So you got to really hope your decisions and your instincts are good when you start to push through the sticks and follow what you think is the main channel, because you don't want to have to turn around and go backwards. So we did that back in 2020 and 2021. The second time we did it in 4 days and 3 hours for the whole route. Basically not sleeping. We took little tiny naps along the way, but there was no significant sleep. I think we added it up after we were done, and over the 4 days, I think there were roughly 4 hours of total sleep. But I tell you, when you take a nap after paddling for 25, 26 hours, you fall asleep right away and you sleep really hard. So it's pretty neat. It's a neat experience. I've never pushed myself without sleep for that long, and I didn't hate it. I don't love it, but we're going to do it again. So the other Algonquin route that's really neat that you guys will like is the Brent Run, which you've probably heard of. And I did the same thing, actually. So I went and I found a website with some Brent Run information. This is a map, and the lakes are actually listed from start to finish. So it starts out down here at the star at Canoe Lake, and then you just follow the list of lakes up to the top until you get to the Brent store, the second star here. And then you turn around and you go back down and do it all again in the opposite direction. A lot of neat lakes along the way. It's a little bit more of a populated route than a lot of sections of the Meanest link. Portages are quite a bit friendlier than the Meanest link. They're just more traveled and not quite as rugged. So that was, after doing the Meanest link for 2 years in a row, the portages on the Brent Run felt like highways, to be honest, which was really nice. It was good to have that feeling, with the exception of one portage, and I got a good story about this one. So the elevation change as you go kind of from this last section here, this must be like Catfish Lake, Narrowbag Lake, just as you get to this 2,340 meter portage here, the last kind of major portage on the route, the elevation change is huge. You're going downhill on the way up, and so you don't really notice it. It feels like you're flying. You're running down a hill with a canoe on your shoulders and hopping from boulder to boulder. Life is great. But on the way back, boy, does that ever kick you in the butt. So this, over the summer, I did this with my buddy Chad. Chad is an adventure racer, where does a lot of orienteering races and travels the globe and kind of does a lot of that stuff. So as well as cycling, and he's really fit is what it comes down to. So on the way back, like we talked about portaging the boat, and usually it's tandem, which makes a lot of sense. On the way back, I was so gassed and winded on that last portage, and the grade was just killing me. I had to take a break, and Chad kind of looked at me, and I'm gasping for air pretty much. And Chad just says, "Well, I'll just take the boat, and you just run behind me as you can." So I think Chad almost portage, probably at least 3/4 of that, almost 2.5 kilometer portage by himself with the boat on his shoulders, and I could barely keep up to him. So he's just an incredible machine when it comes to endurance. So, but I did want to show you this really quick, just so that I can put the idea in your head. If you're looking for information on the Brent Run, so there's tons of info on this one out there. I'm not sure why that video is not showing up, but there's lots of YouTube videos on the Brent Run where you can kind of get a good feel for the route. But again, this describes kind of the origins of the route, and then it's got some good information about the route itself, including that map that I showed you before. It should pop up here. Yeah, and you can zoom in on this. It actually is quite detailed. So if you're looking for information for that one, then this Brent Run website's pretty good. I would like to share these links with you folks. I'm not sure, Gary, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So after when we start going to the discussion, we could put some in the chat, and then when I make the YouTube video, I'll put them on the back page so people can click, not click on it, but I'll even put it in the description so people can click on it after the fact.
Perfect. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, so this total route is it's 140 kilometers of paddling, 22 kilometers of portage. That's for both directions. So it's 162 total, and we did it in the summer. We did it in 22 hours and just a little bit of change. Kind of got the idea in my mind that we can cut it down to 21. So we might give it another try this summer. We'll see.
Now, there was a question from the audience. This is going back to the canoe racing. Are there a lot of females doing it?
Yeah, so it is a niche sport, so there's not a ton of people doing it to begin with in Ontario, but if you go outside of Ontario, it is quite a popular kind of mixed co-ed, as well as, you know, female teams will tandem teams. One really great thing about it, and it's a strength to weight ratio sport. So being light and strong has a huge advantage. So, you know, females in general are typically lighter, and if you're fit and strong, well, you got the odds in your favor. I mentioned that, you know, my buddy Oliver and we came 33rd in that race in Michigan. The very first time we did it, the team in front of us was a team of 2 women that they paddle a lot, and they're kind of, that's their home river, the Asable. But, you know, it's really not uncommon for either a mixed team to beat a men's team, or an all-female team to beat a men's team. So if you look outside of Ontario, there's definitely more female paddlers. I would say there's definitely more male paddlers than female, but it's very inclusive. So lots of opportunities for everyone.
Okay, we've got a question from Ken, who doesn't have a mic, I guess. I've seen folks in the Boundary Waters, Quantico area, using marathon techniques for wilderness paddling, and it seems common, which is, I guess, paddle, 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 switch, paddle, paddle, paddle.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Are these efficient techniques for wilderness paddling? And anybody know why it may be more prevalent out that way? So I guess what he's saying, he's seen it way more there. I think it's more of an American thing, right?
I would agree. I did have a conversation with someone from the Boundary Waters about they call it sit and switch canoeing, which is a really good description for it, because every 10 strokes or so you're switching sides. Yeah, it does seem more common there, and I'm not sure why. Now, I know that I think part of it's just tradition. So, you know, here in Ontario and in Canada, we've got this Canadian style canoeing, which is really popular. Yeah, exactly. You know, and so I think that, you know, it's tough to break away from those roots where maybe they don't have those same traditions and roots, you know, out in those areas. So that would be my guess. But back to the idea of, you know, or the question of, is it more efficient? Absolutely it is. You know, your gear is lighter, first of all, like the paddle's half a pound versus, you know, a pound or more. But just the whole idea of switching sides, the big advantage is you never have to put a steering stroke in.
Yeah, it's all power.
Yeah, so it's every stroke, when you're going straight, at least, every stroke is a forward stroke.
Yeah.
You rarely, if you're doing it right, you rarely have to draw as a stern paddler. So that's a huge advantage. And then, you know, fatigue wise, you're switching sides every 10 strokes. So that sounds pretty sweet too, you know, if you're going out for a long period of time. And then the paddles are light, like I mentioned, so that allows you to have a higher stroke rate. So overall, I think there are a lot of advantages. And I think I had no background in canoeing prior to 8 years ago when I started into this, and I think that may have been a bit of an advantage, because I wasn't stuck in tradition, and I didn't have, you know, I didn't J-stroke, for example, so they didn't have to unlearn that from me, is what my coaches told me. But yeah, I am surprised, because it is a very efficient way to trip. And in fact, it's the only way that I'll trip now. And I also have my Orca certification for Canadian style canoeing. And I like to do it when it's fun and peaceful, but it's not how I'm going to go from point A to point B. That's for sure.
Yeah. Okay, we had one more question from Pat
Sure.
Deuce. Which is worse, Big East or the Nipissing River?
Oh, I think I would take Nipissing. Yeah.
I think the issue with the Big East, it's fantastic if you're going downriver. So
Yeah.
Rain Lake to Huntsville.
Yeah.
No problem. You'll be
Big
fine.
East, it really just is relentless, the Big East. They're both pretty relentless, but it's just the walking and the stumbling and the stub toes just constantly on those rocks and stuff, and slippery. It's slippery. It's definitely
When
the
did you
biggest
do it?
challenge
What
there.
time of the year?
So both times we did it the first or second week of August. So it was pretty low water.
So if the water's warm.
Yep. Yeah. So we weren't worried about that.
The 1st of June, the water's bone cold.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
up in bone cold water, things are shrinking and freezing up.
Yeah. And you spend a lot of time. Yeah. And it's easier to walk than it is to try to paddle up it. So even through the sections that look like you could paddle, you usually end up walking. So you're going to be in knee-high, waist-high water a fair bit.
Because the issue is it's a good flow.
Yeah.
So you gotta have deep enough water to paddle. So if you're just shoveling gravel, you might as well get out.
Yeah. Yeah. And the alternative is, if you've got good flow, then you're paddling upstream, and that's not really efficient for a long period of time. You're going to be exhausted. So that's why we chose to do it when the water was low, because it gave us more options to kind of try to walk up the rocks that were exposed. And low water is a little bit easier to walk up than high. Well, it's actually a lot easier to walk up than high water.
Yeah, and really, if you did it the other way, the Rain Lake to Huntsville, it's class 1, 2. There's nothing serious there, so you can easily shoot through most of it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I just wanted to share some final thoughts that I wanted to express before I finished up. First, if you're looking to get involved, so if this interests you, if what I've been speaking about tonight, marathon canoeing, has piqued your interest, then check out our website, so omckra.com, which stands for the Ontario Marathon Canoe and Kayak Racing Association. You can, shoot us a request to get together through the contact us page, and we'll find you a coach and a boat and some paddles. One of the biggest barriers to the sport, I would say, is cost, and we're really trying to combat that by having the club buy boats and buy paddles, and then have those kept with our coaches. So I've got like a training boat in my backyard. There's a couple others sprinkled throughout southwestern Ontario and some up in eastern Ontario. So we're really trying to accumulate some gear so that when we get new people that don't have equipment, then we can set them up, and at zero cost they can get into a boat and start to experience this and start to learn. So feel free to please reach out to us through the OMCRA webpage. And if you want, you can look me up on Facebook, Chris Prater or Ripple FX Paddles. And if you're on Instagram, you can check out kind of what I've got going on at Ripple FX Paddles. I think
we can open it up to the audience if they have any questions.
Sure. Yeah.
So maybe
sounds
just
good.
Turn off your sharing PowerPoint, and we'll just anybody wants to jump in. And I think I've asked my questions, but anybody else want to jump in for a question or two?
Can you just talk about the protocol for switching sides? You said roughly every 10 strokes. I've noticed in some of the videos that the bow person may change, and it seems like the stern person has discretion whether they change on exactly the same stroke.
Yeah. Okay.
Sort of wiggle room about exactly what they do and how do they decide what to do?
Okay, great question. So the stern paddler is in charge of all that, and they will actually tell the bow paddler when to switch. And the phrase that we use to say switch is hut, like HUT. in Michigan, they say HUP, H-U-P, but we say HUT, H-U-T. So that means that when the stern paddler says HUT, at the end of a stroke that the bow paddler is taking, then that's when the bow paddler will change sides and start paddling on the opposite side. Typically, most often, like when you want to go straight, both the stern paddler and the bow paddler are on opposite sides. And then, you know, if it's a straight course, 8 to 10 strokes later, the stern paddler will call HUT, and both will switch again, and you know, to the opposite sides. And again, they're still paddling opposite sides. So just kind of maintaining opposite sides and changing frequently will keep the boat going more or less straight. When you want the boat to turn, you'll put the stern paddler will put the bow paddler on the same side as them. So you'll have both paddlers, say, paddling on the right, and that'll start to make the boat kind of veer towards the left. That plus a lean or something like that would be how you would turn. Now, the stern paddler will still use draw strokes and stuff as well, but not as often as you would in other forms of canoeing. Great question, though. Yeah.
Just one experience I had, we were doing the London, it was called the Bunny Bundle. Do they still call it that? St. Mary's to Fair.
Okay. Yeah. So that, we don't do that section anymore. Just the water levels are never predictable for us. We've switched the name to the Thames Classic, and we do it out near Dorchester.
Anyway,
Yeah.
Someone lent me one of the fast boats. This was back in the 80s, but it pulled to the left.
Oh, really?
Absolutely wretched from a trial race having a boat. More than we could just counteract by sort of staying on the same side or something. It was pretty
Yeah.
So make sure they've got a straight keel, I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah.
The one thing I do
Have you,
is very tippy.
Yeah. My coaches always say, you know, it's not a tippy boat, it's a tippy paddler. So it really does come back. Yeah, it comes back to what you're comfortable with, and over time you build the comfort.
Yeah.
So, you know, my buddy Oliver and I, we've shot probably some class 2, maybe almost class 3 rapids in a pro boat with a deck on it, and yeah, we took on a lot of water and we had to pull over and bail it out after, but you know, we didn't go under, we didn't swim, and it was still fun. So it's all what you're comfortable doing, for sure.
Are you finding many young people getting involved, or like?
So the demographics, I would say, are 20 years and up. 25 maybe being probably some of the average range of the person coming into the sport. Which is, it would be nice to see some younger kids, but I think that there's so many other avenues for competition for them that they're kind of overwhelmed with opportunities. And then as those opportunities start to evaporate as they get older, that's, you know, when it's a good time to try to bring them out to something like this. But I would say the average age is definitely older. It's probably, you know, 40s or 50s. With a lot of our coaches making up the top end of that.
All right, I guess that's it for questions. Thanks very much, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I'll just finish off. I want to share a couple quotes with you that my coach Bob frequently says, a couple of phrases. So one of them is "life is good," and he'll say that quite often when we're out there working hard and we're taking a break or something, having a drink of water. You know, you just really thoroughly enjoy being outdoors and pushing yourself physically and mentally. It's a tough mental sport. So, you know, just reflecting on the opportunity that we have when we're out there and how lucky we are to enjoy that experience with each other, that, you know, life is good. This is a pretty sweet thing that we're doing. And the other quote is "shut up and paddle." That's one of his favorite things to say. Thanks so much for joining me, folks. I've had a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was great.
So
Yeah.
maybe Chris, you can hang on, and the rest, everybody else can drop off, and we'll just, you know, wrap up with the logistics on what we have to do next. So
Sounds
thanks
good.
to everybody, and I guess we're going to have one more presentation in maybe 2 or 3 weeks from a member that's been in the club for many years. He's got a lifetime of experiences that he just wrote his own personal memoirs, and I'm lining him up for maybe 1 or 2 talks on just talking about his some of his adventures. So stay tuned. In a few weeks.
Sounds
we'll post
great.
that up.
Well, Gary, thank you for hosting, and Chris, thank you for all that information. It was really interesting. I have no
No.
desire to do marathon. Fascinating presentation.
Brenda.
Thanks
Thanks
so
a lot,
much.
Chris.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks, folks.
Thanks. Bye.
All right.